It's time for a Dirt Daily, and today I'm going to put a new winch bumper on the front of Newb Sock, my little two-door Jeep Wrangler. From the factory, Jeeps come with a lot of different options of bumpers. Some of them are steel bumpers, some of them are ready for a winch, some of them are like what I got, which is basically just a plastic fascia over some sheet metal with a couple fog lights. And then it has like these kind of kickers up at the ends right by the fenders where it's designed for pedestrians. It's basically a safety feature that is added to the bumper for the pedestrian market, just in case you hit somebody in a crosswalk. That's all fine and good. What it isn't is a very good bumper for off-roading. And I am going to upgrade from that bumper to a new bumper from AEV, American Expedition Vehicles. AEV's been around since probably the late 90s, and they have done a lot of different Jeep products over the years, and their bumpers are really cool. They're built to be strong, but lightweight. They have different options if you want a full width bumper that goes all the way out to the end of the fender flares, or if you want what I'm gonna do, which is the AEV Rx bumper. It's narrower, so it doesn't stick out as far. It allows the tire to get to an obstacle quicker than a bumper like this, which has this giant wings hanging out over the edge of the tires. Also, I'm going to install a Warn Zeon winch. I've used Warn winches on a lot of my projects. I really like Warn. It's kind of my go-to when it comes to winches. And the Zeon, this is an 8000, comes with synthetic rope. 8,000 may not seem that big, but remember, this is just a little two-door Jeep. It's not a four-door with a rooftop tent and a camper trailer and a whole bunch of accessories and kids and all their toys. This is just a two-person trail rig and also ready for some exploring. So this is their RX bumper from AEV. It's designed more for rock crawling versus like their Expedition overlanding style. And today, this is all gonna go on the front of Newb Sock. The one benefit of that factory bumper, it's really light. It's pretty light, but it's also pretty light duty. And it does have, speaking of lights, it has fog lights in it. Those fog lights will be reused in the AEV bumper. So I have to remove those and remove the wiring from inside there. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the AEV bumper is heavy. It might be heavier than that plastic thing, but it's only about 110 pounds because they use something called hot stamped boron steel. Hot stamped boron steel is the high strength steel that OEMs use in like the unibodies of their vehicles. It's made to hold up better to abuse. It doesn't have to be as thick and heavy as like normal steel. The winch plate that is in the AEV bumper, I think that is just normal welded basic steel. The rest of it is this really nice stampings. And what's cool about that is they allow it to have this very kind of fluid, stamped, stylish look, but also be really strong and be lighter weight than a lot of big heavy bumpers. However, if there's one downfall to the AEV bumper, it's that there's a lot of components. It's going to take a little bit longer than an old school Jeep bumper where you would just unbolt 6 bolts and bolt on a bumper with 6 bolts and the thing was done. I'm willing to invest the time to have a full day of wrenching on this bumper in order to get something that's strong, something that's lightweight, something that looks cool, and it's something that also performs well because I'll be able to stuff a winch in there. I'm going to have some off-road lights in there. There's a skid plate that will protect some of the steering and the sway bar, and at the end of the day, it'll give it a unique look that also is, it's almost an OEM look. Like that plastic bumper is kind of molded to go with the flares. The AEV bumper also has a very kind of factory quality when it comes to look. It has something that you would expect to come from the showroom floor, but it's actually an aftermarket bumper. So, step one, we're going to tear that factory bumper apart, get all the lights and wiring out of it. Step two, we're going to start installing all these components on the front of the Jeep. Look at that. That's the front bumper that goes underneath the plastic, and it's been seriously smashed into something. Luckily, like because this all smashed, like the frame rails didn't get warped, and the frame rails are fine. Now the components that I want out of this are really just this wiring harness that runs across here and the lights that go out on the edges, because I'm going to put these fog lights and this wiring harness back in on the new AEV bumper once I get it up there. So first step, I have to come in here, cut all these little plastic clips. That's another kind of pet peeve of mine these days. It seems like so many new cars are held together with so many little plastic clips, and believe it or not, after like 100,000 miles, those clips don't easily come apart. They're almost never reusable, and then they kind of break if you are trying to remove them. So I'm going to go through and try to pop these out, but I'll probably end up just cutting a bunch of them and using new clips or zip ties to hold it into the new bumper. After hanging the wiring harness for the fog lights across the frame rails and zip tying it up to this power steering line, I grabbed the instructions to see what the next step was. And then I had a little major freak out. Maybe it's a minor freak out, but based on my instructions, I was missing some parts for the bumper. And I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? I really gotta get this Jeep done and I'm missing parts. Well, I had a couple options. I could A, call the tech line at AEV and find out what was going on, if they could resend me the parts. B, I could get on social media and like flame this company for sending me the wrong stuff. Or C, I could just go to the website, go to the instructions page and look through the instructions. It turns out I had printed out the wrong instructions. You see, a lot of these aftermarket companies are making components for OEM vehicles and trying to get the instructions to go perfectly with their components. The problem is sometimes the OEM vehicles change. In 2018, they might have had 1 or 2 engine options. By 2022, 23, there's electric options, V8 options, diesel options, gas options, little gas options, big gas options. So what it comes down to is companies are constantly tweaking their products to work better with the OEM vehicles, and then they're also trying to upgrade all of their instructions to go with that. So before you flame a company because something doesn't make sense, reach out to them and ask them, hey, what's going on here? And maybe they're like, oh, you have the old instructions, you need the new ones. Or maybe they just did forget to ship something. Turns out the new instructions have all of the parts in them that I have on my shop floor, and I can keep moving ahead and get this bumper on this Jeep. I installed the fog lights into the bumper. Now I am going to install the recovery points on the frame rail. So this will basically have like a 3-bolt location, actually it looks like 4-bolt location to hold it in place. And then down here in the bottom, there's like a shackle hanger. This is where you would actually recover the vehicle from. Plus it's a nice big beefy piece of steel. That'll be the first thing to hit if you're ramping up onto obstacles. You're gonna run this bolt all the way through the frame rail hole that's here. But because that frame rail is boxed, you're going to put these 2 sleeves inside there so when it tightens down it doesn't crush the boxed steel. The space is kind of narrow and then gets wide, that's why it's in 2 pieces. You're going to need a magnet, and it takes a little bit of ninja skills to get it on there. You kind of have to weave it up in here, line it up with the hole and with the bolt, and it's inside where you can't really see too well. And then you have to pull the magnet back out and get the next one ready. And then slide all of this back over to one side so that you can line up the next one. It's actually probably easiest to see it straight up under the front here. And then that gets lined up right like, so. And then need that bolt through everything. Oop, get the magnet out of the way. There you go. This will eventually hang out up like that. The front chassis of the Jeep has these metal brackets that hang down. And part of that is for crash, so that if you hit another vehicle, the Jeep doesn't launch up over it. And the AEV skid plate actually uses these to help mount to. Some bumpers, they cut all this stuff off. I'm gonna use the skid plate to protect some of the steering and some of the bottom of the radiator. So in order to do that, you have to insert some riv nuts into the chassis. I have the bottom one in already. There's basically these hexagon stop sign style, hexagon? Yeah, hexagon shaped holes, and you're gonna put the riv nut in there. Run it in with the riv nut tool, and now you have threaded holes, 2 on each side. Next component, you're going to reuse the tow hook brackets that were on the factory bumper. So you want to, this is one of those steps that if you didn't read all your instructions all the way through and you took your old bumper and threw all the parts away, you're going to regret it because you're going to want these. They're just held in with a bolt for now. They're just going to get thrown up here, and then will be, this bolt is just to hold it in place. You don't need to torque it down just yet. And the same goes for that tow hook bolt. It doesn't need torque down just yet. Next we bring the winch plate. This is going to drop over and kind of sandwich those old reinforcement plates. Run a bolt right in there. And for some reason I got it upside down. I mean, I brought it in from the top down. I should have brought it in from the bottom up. Here we go. There we go. Winch plate. Underneath the winch, you're going to put these brackets, which tie into the tow hook bolt, and then also tie into the riv nuts. So those riv nuts will be a part of the winch support. And there's one on either side. So this bracket will tie into that kind of part that pokes down, plus the tow hook, plus the base of the winch plate. It seems like a lot of parts, but I'm sure that, like anything, there's a reason behind you doing all this, because it adds factory style support, and once it all goes together, it might seem like a lot of gadgets right now, but I'm sure once it's all tight and in place, it'll be a lot stronger than just bolting on with 4 bolts right here to this flange, which could just rip right off. Almost forgot, there's another, this is for the skid plate. This goes down here on the bottom and gets sandwiched in there as well. I bolted down the winch plate. I torqued all the bolts to spec, and the winch plate does not sit level with the top of the frame rail. It looks a little funny when you're doing this, because you're going to think, well, why isn't this level with this? But it's actually by design so that it kicks the front of the top of the winch out a little so it doesn't rub against your grill. So the next step is to lift the winch up into place. Warn winches used to use little square nuts that would go into the winch feet, and you'd run the bolts up to it to fasten it. Now these Zeon winches have kind of a flange nylock, which is probably easier to find, and uses and fits in there better. Ugh. So you grab the winch, you kind of feed the wires up out of the way, you slip the flange nut inside, and then you're just going to drop it right down in here. It may actually take a little bit of maneuvering. To get everything in there. There it goes. I heard one of those flange nuts fall out. And then you just want to get one of these bolts started. This one's missing. I can see it back there under the Jeep. We'll grab the other three bolts. Try to get those started. Even though this is leaning out, it still gets right up to the grill. So don't be surprised if the back of the winch is touching the grill. Ooh, that feels like I might be missing the back flange bolt as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the free spool. There it is. Pull a little bit of this cable out so I can work around everything. Conveniently, there is a hole in the bottom of the winch plate. So if that rear nut falls out of the winch, you can get access to it. There we go. Next, the front weldment component of the bumper goes on, and it just slides right on here over top of the winch and sits on top of the frame rails. You'll know it's in the right place when you can see these bolt holes are lined up. Also, the tow bar, or not tow bar, the recovery point will end up swinging up in front like this. So both of those need to be in front of the, or not in front of, but above, kind of swung up in place. Don't forget, if you don't get them perfect, you have to get it, you can't pull the bolt back out or those spacers will drop out. So you might have to kind of shuffle these parts back and then get them in place and then set them back up there. There we go. Also, your winch line is going to want to be fed down here and out through this hole. To hold this weldment piece on, there are 6 fasteners. Actually, the upper 2 don't really hold it to the frame. I'm not really sure what they're for, because the threaded holes for those are part of this, so it might just be to help hold everything together. The bottom 2 or 4, I guess there's 2 on each side, those are the types of fasteners that are going to make you want to throw a wrench. The nuts on the back side of these are flange nuts, so you just need to get them started and get them up close to the sheet metal or to the back of the bumper or the back of the frame, and then they'll grab and they'll tighten. The tricky part is getting them started, because once you have the winch in here, especially if it's a Zeon winch, the winch and the nuts and everything want to live in the exact same spot. I ended up using an extendable magnet and kind of reaching in from the back and then slowly turning them until they all got started, and then reaching in with a wrench and holding them as well as I could so they got up to the sheet metal. And the upper 2 are normal hex bolts. The bottom two are kind of button head Allen bolts. So you're just gonna have to work your way through it. You might be upset at this point. It might be a good time to like go take a break, get a drink, have a cup of coffee, and come back, because you're gonna have to torque these down to 90 foot-pounds before you move on to the next step. It's fun. This is the type of stuff that, like, every project has that fastener that you're just like, why? Who thought it would be a good idea to put it there? But once it's all together, you'll never think about that bolt again. I added these pieces to the base here. These will kind of tie in the bumper. Then I also put the wiring in for some off-road lights that will hang down here. And next is this cover. This piece just basically sits up on top here as kind of a beauty piece and hides everything. It is plastic. I also don't expect to be smashing this part of the bumper into anything, but if you do, it has steel hidden behind it. And then you just put some little nuts on the back here and tighten this down. Everything is coming together. Oops, I forgot the washers. So this piece just hides here. There's bolts that are hidden, kind of weld nuts. There's 3 of them across the bottom here. 2 of them for off-road lights and 1 of them for a forward-facing camera. If you have a Jeep that has the forward-facing camera, you can move that to this AEV bumper. Somebody was giving me a hard time the other day because I wear these glasses. They were like, oh, you're trying to look like somebody. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to see. Next comes the front portion of the bumper. You're going to want to feed the winch line through this if it's hanging down. This piece covers everything like that. You're going to put these like clip nuts in there as well. The front 2 or 4, there's 2 on each side, are for screws that'll hold some bezels on. There's also a large one on the bottom for an M8 bolt. And then all of this will kind of line up on top of each other, and you'll feed some hardware down through everything. It's kind of good to put all these bolts in place, make sure it's all going to line up. If you need some sort of alignment tool just to kind of get all the parts in line, and then drop a fastener down in there. Moving right along, I put the fair lead on. I was getting a little concerned because the bolts from the fair lead come in from the back, and I was worried it was getting too close to the winch. It actually wasn't a problem at all. So the fair lead is on. The winch end was a little bit tight to pop through there, but it's through. And now I'm going to go on to this outer corner. This corner kind of slides in. This is where AEV offers options. They have a longer corner, I think it's called the EX, maybe for Expedition. And then they have this short kind of stubby corner for the RX, which is like their rock crawler version. And which is nice because now the bumper doesn't stick out past the tires. You kind of need to get all of these bolts started, and there's 2 up here and 2 out here and 2 right here, and there's another one here that we'll use once we get to putting the recovery hook on, but that isn't where we're at just yet. So it's also a good idea to have kind of an alignment bar that you can pry everything, even though it's pretty precision, there's still the chance that things are gonna not line up perfectly. There we go, that looks better. Moving right along. Getting this flange nut on the back here is another one of those tricky fasteners. Oh, it's going together. Good, good, good. These coming together. In addition to the hot stamped boron steel bumper, there's also a skid plate that comes down here and ties into those brackets that we put in earlier. I'm gonna use a bunch of little fasteners and get this started. It's probably easiest to do this on your back, looking up at everything. And you only need to get the inner bolts started for now, because the outer ones will line up, will be held up with the recovery hooks. So there's two in the middle for now, and then we'll put two in the back section here. Next, we swing the recovery point up, and first we put a small fastener in there to hold it in place. Then we take one of these larger bolts and thread it through the face part, and that'll be our recovery point. Bumper is just about done. There are still a few more steps to wire in the off-road lights that I have to mount, and to finish wiring the winch. These are some little headlight bezels for the fog lights. This is kind of like a plastic piece, so that it'll probably be the first part to go if you were in a major accident. But it's an easy to replace piece that just goes on with a couple screws. Overall, I'm pretty stoked on this bumper. The one thing that I guess I like to see is a tow hook in addition to just something for a shackle, but that's kind of the old school Jeeper in me. I really like the style. I think it goes well with the rest of the Wrangler. And I'm gonna mount some lights right in here. I have these two really cool AEV LED lights, and then I have to put the hook on the end of the winch, and then wire up the winch and the lights. The other thing, don't forget, if you ever put a new winch on your vehicle, you should run 90% of the winch line out and then winch in under load. So like park on a really kind of not too steep incline and just winch up. That gets all the winch line, whether it's rope or cable, steel cable or synthetic rope, kind of preloaded onto your winch drum. And then when you are actually having to use the winch off-road, it's not going to like crush down on the layers below it. So don't forget to pre-stress your winch line. I'm gonna mount some lights and then call it a night. Next up on the AEV bumper install is a set of these 7000 series LED off-road lights. They come with a clear lens. I swapped out to a amber lens. I just thought it would give it some flare. And then you're just gonna bolt everything on. You do have to change the mounting brackets and get the proper mounting brackets for the bumper, but they will sit right up in here. Couple bolts and a couple flange nuts. Pretty cool. They also have nice black covers. Some states, the authorities frown upon having your off-road lights uncovered. There it is. I've finished the winch install and the winch bumper install and the off-road lights. Now all I have to do is do a little bit of wiring and the front end of the Jeep is done. I have a bumper that is a lot stronger than that plastic one that I started out with. I have a winch, which is great. I always tell people, put a winch on before you do just about anything to your vehicle. Go four-wheeling, learn what you can do, what you can't do, and then you have a winch to get out. And I have some off-road lights, which if you live out in the country, you're going four-wheeling at nighttime, it's always good to have off-road lights. So that's it for this Dirt Daily. Done with the front bumper. Do a little bit of wiring and call it a night. See you guys next time. I've been working on this Jeep. Today I installed all the things that were in these boxes. Winch, bumper was in this box, and this box, and this box, and that box. The bumper was in a lot of boxes. I really like this box. Like if I sold popcorn at the baseball game, this would be a great box for, or like if I was like walking through a cafe selling muffins. Here you go. I also like these. Came with my lights. These are really nice hats. Cold beer, get your muffins. Get your muffins. Blueberry muffins, banana nut muffins.